Okay. All right. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited about doing this segment with you guys. I wanted to do it for a long, long time because it has to do with the 42-letter name of God. Actually, I've got like my own history, my own stories behind it, but I managed to acquire an entire book this thick, okay, just on the 42.
Nice.
Yeah, it is. It's called it's just on the Ana B'Koch. This is actually written by a Rav who passed away very recently. He was a big Mekubal, but he didn't carry himself like a Kabbalist. He wore just a simple cap and walked around, and he had a milk business, actually. He had a nickname, this Rabbi Chaim Cohen. His nickname was the Chalban. Chalban, which means chalav is the Hebrew word for milk. And Chalban is like the milk guy, but I call him the Milkinator. So anyways, he's the Milkinator, and he wrote a lot of books, and this is one of them just on this 42-letter name of God. And there's tremendous segulot, or special properties, that come out that a person can practice. And we're going to go into that, God willing, today, and what's the significance of it. Because I think in the notes that I've handed to you, first of all, you have to know that there is more than one name of God, as we know, even when we relate to the 10 Sefirot, the Esser illuminations, the 10 illuminations called the Esser Sefirot. Each one has like a name of God, right, associated with it. Each one of these 10, like Elohim, there's Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, there's Shekai, there's El, there's a lot of different names. And then it goes down into more expansion of other different names of God, such as there's a 12-letter name of God, which is basically the permutations of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, or actually it's Yud-Kei Vav, that it's permuted and it comes out to be a 12-letter name. And then, of course, there is the 42-letter name. There's a 72 actually name of God, 72 names, like in one succession. That comes out to really be 3 letters each, comes out to be 216. 216-letter name of God. But here we're just going to go over some of the things briefly, okay, to kind of fill us in, because the idea here is why I'm now Rabbi is because we say it after we count the Omer. As we know that it's a mitzvah on starting from the second night of Passover all the way until Shavuot, that there is a mitzvah to count. We call it the counting of the Omer. So in the counting of the Omer, which is basically 49 days, every single night, you have to wait until nighttime to count. You have to say it with your mouth. You cannot think it. And there's a lot that goes into it that we'll talk about, God willing, next week when I bring from the Arizal. So the counting that we do, every single time we count, we say a blessing. We say tonight is the first night of the Omer, the second night of the Omer. And what is Omer, right? I thought Omer was a kid in my class. And then, of course, it wasn't, because Omer means that after Passover, they would bring from the new grain from that year, okay? So they would bring from the new grain of that year, and really all the grain that was already rooted until even before Passover, right? Then that grain becomes permitted, but any grain that's grown after is not permitted until the following year. Actually, that's a prohibition in the Torah against eating the new grain, chadash, but we won't go into that for now. Basically, there was an offering brought in the temple, right, on a daily basis. It was an ephah of barley. It was a bushel of barley. But also, in respect, really, what we're counting the days until Mount Sinai. And there's lots of deep things that go into the significance of counting the Omer. Really, the idea, of course, simply that most people are aware of, is that when we were in Egypt, we fell to the 49th level of defilement, of tumah, lack of life energy. And even though that we left Egypt physically, there still needed to be an extraction from to get the Egypt out of us. Like I always say, you could take you could take the man out of Egypt, but can you take the Egypt out of the man? So the idea of you could physically leave Egypt, but you still might be emotionally attached, right? I know, because you did have a very serious, deep emotional relationship with your Egyptian master, because he beat you only 5 times a day and you're missing your beatings, most likely. So in any case, we're counting the 49 days, right, in order to cleanse ourselves to be ready for the Mount Sinai experience, which is Shavuot. So it was basically the idea is of cleansing, but it works in a very serious form, okay? And then, like I say here, we say these 42 letter name of God after we count the Omer. Also, we say the 42 letter name of God every morning. It's in the section of the prayers where we say the offerings. And then we also say it, and you might notice it. Does anybody want to tell me where the third place where we do say it on a regular basis? The 42 letter name of God, it's called Ana B'Koach. It's actually on Shabbos evening before we accept the Shabbos. Okay, we say this special prayer that I'm going to share with you that we're going to go into. So the first thing is why 42 and why the significance of 42 and where do we find it? So, I always thought 32 was a significant number. Actually, that's like my Gmail account has 32 in it, Rabbi 32. It's because I thought 32, man, But actually there's 42 that the Zohar goes into and many of the writings go into. 42 basically, as I wrote here in the notes, basically is because if you go that there's 32 times it mentions in the first parsha of Genesis, Elohim, God. But then there's 10 times where he says, and God said. There's 10 statements. So the 32 plus the 10 statements basically is 42. So it's a very significant number that we have of 42. There's also other places where we say, actually that are hinted, more or less, right? When we say in the Shema, Vidibarta bam, and you will speak them, bam is Beit Mem, which is 42. What's the significance, right? And then, of course, if you read the first paragraph of the Shema that we say 3 times a day or 2 times a day. Yeah. The first paragraph of the Shema has 42 words in it. Okay? Also, I found out, as I'm doing a little bit of investigation, the very first blessing of the Shemona Esrei has 42 words in it. So the rabbis like 42. Okay? So the idea is like, why? And why do we have to say it by Sfiras Omer? Why do we saying it before Kabbalah Shabbat, before we accept the Sabbath? Why are we saying it every morning? My story is, I wasn't saying it. I knew about it. Everybody knows about it. Everybody skips in the part of the prayers, when they engage in prayer, everybody skips the korbanot, the offering part. They go right to, the later parts. Right? So it's really, the idea is, okay, that's what I was doing. I'm a yeshiva guy. This is what yeshiva guys do. We skip. Right? Sometimes when we're in a rush, we're busy. Right? And when I was first in yeshiva, I used to have a practice of call it a fetish, to go visit Kabbalists. Right? If I hear about any rabbi giving blessings, wherever it was, right? We'd go there, okay? We were hunting rabbis, okay? Rabbi hunt to go. We go in front of this big makubal and we go, what do I got to do? Fix me. What do I got to do, right? Fix my soul, right? And I remember going to several. I remember going to this one rabbi, Abu Dawood. He had like these blue eyes. I think he was blind. And he would open up a book, some book, and he would start reading your life in the book. That was bizarro, right? he would just start saying all kinds of things that you did in your life. He would just open up just seemingly a random page. Anyways, he used a book. I went to one who was my Rosh Hashiva called him the mezuzah guy. Okay? What would you do is you take your mezuzah to him. His name was Chacham Ben Tov. You take your mezuzah to him, and he would look up your mezuzah and he'd go, oh, your soul, very, very bad, very, very bad, right? And he would tell you what you have to do to fix your soul, okay? You did such and this and very, very bad. So then there was this one rabbi. I go to other Mekubalim and just get a bracha. And then there was this one rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda. He was very unique because he had not sat with you and he said, you have to, and he tested you, which I think I realized in hindsight it was muscle testing, but I'm not sure. And anyways, he would like test you, look at your face, and he would say, okay, you did this, this, and this. He'd nail you. And then this is what you got to do, fix it. And it was extreme fixing. It was fasting, right? And it was saying all the book of Psalms, and you have to do a lot of stuff. And then I did the tikkun, I left him, and then he actually came back and visited me in yeshiva looking for me. I was like, after a year, okay? And I came out and he says, you didn't come back to me. I had to give you the rest of your tikkun, of your rectification. I'm like, oh. So in any case, I did go back, and he sat with me, and he did. And he says, do you say this every day? The Anabakoach, the 42-letter name of God every day? No. He says, he sat with me. He went over word for word. He says, you must say it every day. Thank God I've been saying it every day. And the main significance of the books that I have read so far, because a lot of people exploit this 42-letter name of God. Oh, it's the miracle or whatever, and we won't go into that. It gets your prayers answered. It brings your prayers right up. It's like the key to the gate. Imagine you make a huge journey and you get all the way there, and then where's the key? Honey, I thought you had the key. No, you had the key. Where's the key? And you don't have the key. So basically, it is the key that opens up the gates to your prayers, okay? It gets it up without any obstruction whatsoever. So it's like a direct connection, okay? Imagine if you had God's direct cell phone. 6 digits, okay? So in any case, 42 digits actually, okay? So we say it in those places, and we're going to talk about really the significance of why we say it in Sfiras Omer. Why do we say it in the counting of the Omer in these days between Passover to Shavuot? So the idea here is that hits us all that we've gone over before when we studied the Baal Shem Tov and the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, which is that if you count the times that the Bnei Israel traveled through the desert, you will count actually that they traveled 42 masaot, 42 travelings, okay? But if you actually really do a count, and this is significant for us, that I read, that they traveled 42 different places in the desert, but they backtracked 7. 42 plus 7 is 49, okay? Because the 49 days that we count the Omer, the 49 levels to get out of our state of defilement, the 49 levels to reach a higher level of self, to work on ourselves. It's a very special time these days where the working on ourselves gets enhanced significantly, okay? Even the slightest moves can have tremendous ramifications. And so the idea really that's being expressed here is that the 42 travelings that they did in the desert is basically going along also the days between Passover to Shavuot in a micro form, okay? Just like in a macro, they traveled for 40 years, went to this XYZ place. So also, we also, actually, as the Baal Shem Tov, we're going to read it inside because I think it's worth it, okay, have the exact same pattern, okay? So it says, these are the journeys of the Bnei Israel. It's in one of the sheets that I handed to you guys. I think it's the second sheet. So I heard in the name of my master, my grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov of blessed memory, that all of the journeys were 42, and they exist within each and every person from the time he or she is born until they return to their world, to the next world. So to understand this, that from the day the person is born and exits the womb of his mother, that person is in the aspect, the same formula of going out of Egypt. If you look at it, going through the sea split we went through is a birth canal, okay, for the Jewish people. But also, because the Torah is cosmic, it relates to each and every one of us every single day, in every single moment. It has to teach us something. It's not just giving us history, okay? When in Passover and Pesach, right, we have the opportunity to give birth to ourselves, okay? Some people take it, some people don't, okay? So the going out of Egypt, that's our also being born. Afterwards, the individual goes from journey to journey, and that's not necessarily physical. Journey to journey until they arrive at their respective cosmic land of the living. I think that's how I called it. Okay, because the whole story of the Chumash, of the 5 books of Moses, is they go back and just before they're about to go into the land of Israel, right? Basically, a family goes down to Egypt, gets out, and goes back to Israel. So here the rest of the whole Chumash is about getting, and finally, just before we go to the land of Israel, the next world. So that represents the next world, okay? So as we have mentioned in the verse, according to the mouth of God they encamped, and according to the mouth of God they traveled. This is the aspect of constricted consciousness and expanded consciousness, or what we call katnut or godlut, or what we would look at as immaturity versus maturity. Every single thing that we are working for in our prayers, our Torah study, and our observance is working to get to the level of maturity, okay? Spiritual maturity, okay? Where we can think for ourselves, we can perceive in a right way, in a correct way. We have a close and feel and live a close relationship with God, that we understand these things happen because God wants it to happen. This thing happens because God wants that to happen. And every single thing is perfectly orchestrated in our lives in order to develop us. Okay? So that's what it's about. Now, during the desert, they fell many times. Right? There were the 10 times you tested me in the desert, Hashem said. 10 times, because where's my water? Where's my meat? Right? So they were constantly, some places they blew it. The spies, golden calf, they blew it. And the idea here is this, and it's very interesting for us also, right? Just to read on here a little bit, I also heard from a certain special person that the 42 journeys are the aspect of the counting of the Omer, which come from the name of the 42-letter name of God. They correspond to the counting we do from the second night of Passover until the festival of Shavuot, which is the completion of the receiving of the Torah that we've talked about. Even though they're really 49, right? As we're going to see when we look at the 42-letter name of God, we're going to see that the Shabbos, because each name corresponds to a different day of the week. And of course, the Shabbos is the aspect of the inclusion of everything. So the roots are actually 42, which are hinted regarding the 42 journeys written there. Okay? So the journeys written in the Torah are definitely to teach each and every Jewish person the correct path to follow so that he knows the straight way to go all the days of his life. Interesting. He or she must firmly know that every one of those journeys is in a special and holy pattern. As I heard from my grandfather, he said in the name of the Brit Menucha, that the place, let's say, for example, Kivrot HaTa'ava, which means basically the burial place of the craving, of the lust, or as I wrote here, graves of craving, like a gravy crane. Gravy, whatever. Right? So anyways, they called that place after they ate meat 30 days, and then they all died, not all of them, but those people who lusted after meat died, and they had to bury them. So they call it kivrot hatava, but actually it has a much more deeper, significant place. Right? In this place, the Jews were to reach the potential was to reach such a high level of connection to God that they would bury all their material cravings, which is in the aspect of wisdom. Because if you really had wisdom, you'd see through everything, and you wouldn't fall to your lusts and desires. The explanation is that someone who comes to the level of wisdom, all lusts are nullified because of his great attachment to God. From this we understand that all the journeys are on a very sanctified and high level. There's potential there. There's potential. Okay? And so in each and every stage of our lives, we have 42, and who knows what one you are or I am, we don't know. But we are tested, or let's not say tested, we are given opportunities in sometimes where things seemingly don't go our way, and it's an opportunity for us to have emunah and wait, I call it waiting, for an aspect of light to be bestowed upon us, a lesson, an insight, okay? You can call it the 42 insights, okay? And so the immediate significance of the 42 times that the Jewish people travel in the desert, which corresponds to an individual's life, that he has 42 journeys. And now here in the micro, in your Sefirot Omer counting, in your counting of the Omer, every night you say, today is the 22nd day of the Omer, whatever. And you just expressing that, right? You are actually, in my opinion, you are fixing in the micro. You are sweetening the judgments, as we say, because now, if you don't know, is now, as we know that the way that God runs the world, he opens up windows and there's different energies which are flowing in the world, different patterns, like you have springtime. Passover always has to come in springtime. Why does Passover? Because it's the life, it's freedom. People are no longer locked in their houses because of the cold winter. They're going out. So the idea of why Passover has to be in springtime is because the energy of spring is life and freedom. It's not because, oh, Passover happened here, so let's make this the window. No. The window was there, and Passover happened in the window. The same thing by all of the other holidays and all of the Rosh Chodesh, today's Rosh Chodesh, Ani Hashem Rufuecha, it's ER, right? The window of healing is in this month. People want to try to explain why this month is the window of healing, right? Because if you look at the, sorry to digress just a little bit here. If you look at today's Rosh Chodesh, ER is usually spelled Aleph Yud Yud Reish, right? But if you if you look at ER, everybody says, and all the Hasidic Sforim, Ani, which is Aleph, Hashem, Rufoecha. And two Yuds is like the name of God put together, you know, as we have in many prayer books, the two Yuds. Aleph, Yud, Yud, Reish. Ani Hashem, Rufuecha. I am Hashem, your healer. There's a verse which says that. But we look at this month as a month very significant and very special for healing. And there's many people who want to get into the explanation. One explanation I heard, just to say simply before we get back on, was because this month, believe it or not, is the only full month that we're counting the Omer every day. Okay? This is like 30 days of counting Omer. The month before, which is Nisan, we only had 2 weeks. And then you only have like 5 days in Sivan. But this month is full of Omer counting. And to get back on track here, Hashem opens up windows. All these windows, these energy, the influxes, they come to us in order to fix us, in order to build us into being a proper vessel, right? Proper, okay? So this time period actually is the time period where there's what's called gevurot being bestowed. Gevurot are powers, okay? Gevurot are something that most people want to run away from because it means constriction, okay? It's no accident that the students of Rabbi Kiva died at this time. 24,000 students of Rebbe Kiva died. That's why my beard is growing a little long. Okay, because we don't shave, we don't haircuts, we don't listen to live music, we don't have weddings. Because there was a 33-day period, which it's an argument exactly when it is, where Rabbi Kiva lost 24,000 students. Okay, but now, so there's gevurot happening. There's a bestowal of energies of energies of judgment, and we count the Omer to sweeten those judgments. We'll get to it another time. Okay. But basically what we're doing is, by doing this mitzvah, we are sweetening the judgments. So now getting to the idea of the 42 travelings of the Bnei Israel, of the children of Israel in the desert, and our lives correspond to the 42 places where we travel. And the 42, plus 7 weeks, plus 7 Shabbosim. The 42 plus 7 Shabbosim, 7 Shabbases, are the way in us, in our time zone, our, we'll call it space-time reality, okay, get the opportunity to sweeten the journey. In other words, in a micro, we fix it, and we fix it for the whole world, and we fix it for ourselves, that we are able to sweeten the whole journey of the whole year and whatever's going on. Okay? And that will enable us, actually, that if such opportunity should arise, we could reach those opportunities, take advantage of those opportunities. Okay? So that's why the significance of 42. Okay? 42 plus 7. So now you have in these sheets here, I have several sheets here, okay, that I handed out. But let's go to this one for now. This one is like kind of hard for you to see on the screen, but if you look at it, I do the best I can. This is the 10 Sefirot. Now, we've had classes on this before, on the 10 Sefirot. These are the 10 illuminations, or the 10 garments that God made in order to relate to us. As I drew a line here, you'll have the first 3 of these 10 illuminations. These are called the mental illuminations, or the mental Sefirot. The lower 7, which is what we're more interested in, are what's called the emotional Sefirot. And I did write down the names, actually, here on the sheets. This is kindness. This is power or discipline, right? This is beauty or balance. Then we have Netzach, dominance, Hod, splendor, empathy. We have Yesod, which I call commitment. And then you'll have Malchut at the end, total acceptance and being the receptacle. Each one of these are ways God relates to us. It is the spiritual genetic code of the universe, that it is in everything, made everything. Everything has to be reflecting or expressing one of these. Everything. There can't be anything without it. Okay? And now in these sheets, if you'll see, in each one of the lower 7, I put a smaller little 7 in here, because you have to know, I didn't want to do it because it would be too much. To put really in each one of these is a micro of these 10 Sefirot, okay? It really does go on a few times, okay? They say infinite. But let's say, and here is 10, here is 10, here is 10. But I want to focus on down here, and I only put 7 in here, just to make it simple. Then in each one of these is 7. Now 7 is a classic number that we all understand, right? There's 7 days in the week, right? This corresponds to the 7 days of the week. There are 7 tzaddikim, right? And other things that it corresponds to. So the idea here is, if you have 7 in each one of those, and 7 times 7, of course, is 49. Now, the significant part is the malchut, or the lower one, of each one of these. The lower one of each one of these lower 7 is the Shabbos of that Sefirah, okay? And each one corresponds to a day of the week. You'll see Chesed is number 1, that corresponds to Sunday. Monday, which is power or discipline, that's Monday. You'll notice that Monday, even in creation in Genesis, God did not say on Monday, Ki Tov, not once. Usually every single day he says, and God created that and it was good. And God created that, and it was good, right? On Monday, there was no good, and that's why everybody has Monday as a drag, okay? That's why, yes, everybody doesn't like Mondays, right? For us, it's like Sundays, though. But in any case, no, Mondays are still. Monday, God did not say it was good, okay? And of course, Tuesday is balance, beauty. People like Tuesdays, you'll see. That's the energy of Tuesday, right? And then there's an energy of Wednesday, right? These are all correspond to all of those, the 7 days of creation. And different things were created on these days. Light, darkness. What was created on the third day? The grass and the trees and the dry land. And then the fourth day was created the luminaries, right? The fifth day was created the fish and the birds. And the sixth day was created man. And then it was the Holy Shabbos, okay? So that's basically how it corresponds to creation. So in each one of these, of course, we're going through bit by bit by bit for 49 days. Each one of those days, we say, we count that day, and the counting itself, the Arizal says so, sweetens the judgments. You could get into some Kavana, and there are people who write books on it. I have yet to write any book on it, because you do the best you can. Okay? So now we get into the 42-letter name of God. Now the 42-letter name of God, classically as it is written, actually I had it in these sheets right here. Each one corresponds to a day of the week, right? There are seven sets of 6 letters. 7 sets of 6 letters is 42. 7 times 6 is 42. Each one of these names corresponds to a day of the week. Okay? Corresponds to a sefira, one of the sefirot. Corresponds to a lot of things. There's a lot of correlations with it. But of course, as these letters are on your page, you cannot just go ahead and say it as it is written. Okay? We're not allowed. It's too powerful of a name. Just like we are not allowed to say the Yud Ke Vav Ke as it is written out. Okay? We say Adonut. We don't say Yud Ke Vav Ke. We don't say as it is written. Because why? The Chavetz Chaim says the light is so great you can incur spiritual damage that you might not feel. Okay? So we don't want to incur spiritual damage to our soul by accessing or saying, expressing some form of light that is greater than we are capable of holding. And you don't know what could happen. Okay? Which is probably why they say that certain people who study Kabbalah go crazy. Okay? So here we have this sheet here. We get to this sheet here. I downloaded online. You can even go and find maybe better ones. This is one that I found. Now, so the name itself, as it is written here, you can't pronounce it straight. There are meditations we're going to get into where you can do it. But classically came this great sage. He was the king, the head of the first of the Kabbalists, according to the Chalban, to Rabbi Chaim Cohen. And there was, his name was Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana. Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana, who was one in the 2nd century, who wrote this prayer. And in this prayer, basically the first letter of the prayer is the 42-letter name of God. So basically it's a kosher way of saying the 42-letter name of God, by saying it in Ana B'Koach, as you have it in the sheets here. Okay? You Ana B'Koach are just the first 2 words that we mentioned. Okay? It's just everybody knows it because that's basically the jargon word. But of course, we say Ana B'Koach Gedulas Yamincha, right? And the rest of it. That each one of the words of this prayer is the letter significant for the 42-letter name of God. Okay? And this is what Rabbi Yehuda, that Kabbalist, sat down with me word for word and went over the entire meaning of it with me. Okay? I'm like going, I can't believe he's doing this, while he was doing it. So I have here the transliteration for those who can't read Hebrew, so at least you could say it. And then, of course, there's the Hebrew, and then there's the translation of it, which not too bad, but we have to just you have to get into the deeper meaning of each one of these, basically 7 sets of 6. 7 sets of 6 letters, okay? And first, a little bit about Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana. Not much is written about him. There's many sages who are all throughout the Talmud, right? Talmudic, or from the Gemara period. Very few is written about Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana. He did write Sefer HaBahir, if anybody knows what that is, right? One of the earliest Kabbalistic works. He wrote that. But I'd say as far as the teaching in the oral law goes, he basically made 3 prayers and taught in Pirkei Avos. He has a statement of teaching in Pirkei Avos. The prayers that he would say that are noted for him authoring are the prayer that you say when you first come to the synagogue to pray. You're coming to the Beit HaMidrash, not to pray, sorry. When you're coming to learn, when you're going to go learn, there was a certain prayer that he would make, and everybody says it, and it's in certain prayer books, which I don't have right now. But the prayers was saying basically to the level of, God, if I fall in anything, like in other words, I say something untrue in the learning with my study partner, please let him not be happy that I said something incorrect. And God, if he says something incorrect, let me not be happy. In other words, he was very much into the interconnectedness and only wanting to build up each other and never be happy with the downfall in terms of another person's learning. In other words, may the Torah that we learn be absolutely pure. Pure. No ulterior motives, not I ego, I'm smarter. Okay? And the other one, of course, was when he'd leave the house, the study house, when he would leave the Beit Midrash, so we would say, oh, thank you, God, that I'm in such a fantastic portion, that I can study Torah. And because so many people, they don't have the Torah. And he basically was a thanks. And then he wrote this also, which is the Ana B'Koach. Okay? But list a little bit about his idea of Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana's power. Okay? Because basically he was the one who was able to gaze at the Merkava all the time. Okay? He was on such a high level. He had a student, Rabbi Yishmael. I'm going to read this from a book, which I read it when I first did Tshuva, Meditation and Kabbalah, Rabbi Kaplan. I went through it. And now that I'm looking at it, man, it's really a masterpiece. Needs to be looked at again after I've studied so much, and maybe it'd be amazing. So anyways, Rabbi Yishmael was a student of Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana. He said, the entire company said to me, his friends, he says, son of the haughty, you rule with the light of the Torah, just like Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana. See if you can bring him back from his gazing perception. Let him sit with us and tell us the meaning of those who descend to the Merkava, but do not descend. Those who descend to the Merkava, but do not descend. Some people can go, some people cannot go, right? So we want to know the secret to the Merkava. Who can go, who cannot go? Why are they attacked by guardians of the 6th chamber? Okay, in other words, people who would do this out-of-body experience to go to the Merkava, they get to the 6th chamber and then they get these angels would whack them and chase them away. Why do they not touch those who actually descend to the Merkava at all? Somehow there's other people who make it. Right? What's the difference between these two? Okay. But here's Rabbi Nehunia. He's sitting in his study, and he's like this. And his eyes are open, but he's in another world. Okay? Rabbi Yishmael said, I immediately took a cloth. Listen to this. I immediately took a cloth of feathery down and gave it to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva gave it to our servant, telling him to take this cloth and touch it to a woman who had immersed in the mikveh from her cycle, because women have to go to the mikveh in their cycle. But there's a question concerning her dunking in the mikveh, because maybe there was a chatzitza on her, maybe there was something stuck to her, which would make a block between her body and the water. There was a question concerning her, okay, this woman, I don't know how they found it, but they found. Right? This was to be the case that if brought to the sages, one person would say, no, it's forbidden what she did. She has to go back. But most people would say, no, it's okay. Most rabbis, if you'd ask her this question concerning this woman who went into a bathhouse, right, into a mikveh, and she come out again, she did something questionable? And one rabbi would say no good, and most rabbis would say it's okay. Okay, follow me, okay? So the servant was instructed to tell the woman to touch the cloth, don't forget we're dealing with the cloth, with the tip of the middle finger, but don't press on it, just lightly touch it away, as if you were removing a cinder from your eye, just barely brush it. Okay? So they had a cloth touched by a woman that had a doubtful if she was kosher for her mikveh, to lightly brush off this cloth. They take this cloth and they gave it to Rabbi Yishmael. He picked it up with like a perfumed twig of myrtle, which had been soaked in pure balsamium. I don't know why we need that. But in any case, he then placed it on the knees of Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana while he's like in his meditative state. And instantly, as soon as they put this cloth on his knees, who summons me from my slumber? Right? It was all of a sudden he's woken up because they chased him out from the throne of glory. He says like, what? What'd you guys bring me down here? Don't you know where I was right now? What's wrong with y'all? Right? So they say, we got to ask you some questions, Rabbi. Right? Right? So that's what happened. Right? He was immediately dismissed before the throne of glory because of that. In other words, I just wanted to impress upon you like this unbelievable rabbi, right, who is in this trance-like state, and how they got to wake him up. They had to wake him up in order to ask him a question, and how the means what they had to get to wake him up. Okay, and this guy was in the throne of glory, like we go to who knows, right? Like we go to the kosher restaurant. Okay, so let's go over now. Okay. The idea I didn't go over enough of this important thing about the 42 travelings, because it was an important word that we have to understand, and it helps us. That the 42 places where we travel, even though we don't know where they are and how they are, the Rashi brings a parable of why God had to go ahead and count every single one of them in the end of the book of Numbers. Every single one. And we went to here, and then we schlepped to here, and this was a schlepp, and oy vavoy, and this is a schlepp, and here. Right? So he brings a parable of a king who needed to take his son to a doctor, to a faraway place. They had to travel, and they had to stop at different places on the way. And the king finally got to the doctor, healed his son, and he's on his way back. And as he's on his way back, that he shows his son the places that they stopped. He says, you remember when we were here that night and water leaked in and we had to get buckets? Do you remember we were here this night and you had a headache and I had to get find water to wipe you down with? Do you remember we were here and you stubbed your toe? You remember we were here? So God was showing the Jewish people every single one of those places where they traveled. And the point is this. So too, for us, God is going to show us at the end of our journey that each one of those places, even though they could be like terrible passages of life, experiences and situations which we wish they could have been better, but Hashem is going to show each and every one of us exactly why those places needed to occur. Okay? That's an important point, okay? Because the bottom line is emunah, okay? The bottom line is faith. Okay, so so let's go into it now, okay? Let's go into the first one. Okay, we'll explore that. So like I say, there are 3 times where we say this in the morning, every single day. I think the Sephardi might even say it in the afternoon prayer. There is during the Sefirot to Omer, and then there is before Shabbos. And basically, this special prayer is the key that unlocks all of your prayers and brings them straight up. It's like putting it right on the desk, right, of the king. And the idea here is, of course, there is a meditative practice to do this with. And then there's a special way even to say this prayer. And if you can say it in Hebrew, you might miss it if you have the transliteration. But if you say it, you really have to say it in 2-letter sequences. There are 6 letters in each set. 6 letters in each set, and then 1 which basically puts them all together. The 6 letters basically have to be in form like 222, like such as I'm going to tell you now. Ana b'koach, gedulas yamincha, tatir tzarura. Okay? They have to be said, even though if you see them classically, as I did them here in this sheet here, they're grouped in 3s. They're sets of 3, right? If you look in the first Sefirah, it's 3 letters and 3 letters. But really, when they're pronounced, they have to be done in 2 letters sequences, okay? And the idea of what I always try to do for myself, is I always try to implement the technique of the Baal Shem Tov. The prayer technique of the Baal Shem Tov, that maybe what might have touched on in earlier classes very slightly, was that in the Ark of Noach, when it says, when God was telling Noach to make a ark, he said, Sohar ta'aseh lateva. Sohar ta'aseh lateva means basically make a shining for the ark. Sohar is shining. Tzadi he reish. Okay, Sohar. Now Rashi interprets it as a window or a shining stone. But the Baal Shem Tov says the word teva just means word in Hebrew. It means ark and word. So when you say Tzohar Taseh La Teva, really he gives you a whole different reality, peels off something and goes, you have to make the words shine in your prayers and in your learning. And that means really every time you say a letter, you have to imagine and picture it in your mind's eye as if that letter is shining in the brightest way. And then you go to the next letter, and then the next letter, and finally the letters will form a word. And then that word is your ark. And then you have to put you and your whole family, you and your whole family have to go into the word, right? So that is really an amazing technique of the Baal Shem Tov. I just told you to on one foot. But really there's a volume about it, okay? That basically it's hard to do, and you're asking like, oh my gosh, Rabbi, are you insane? Every single time I pray, I have to imagine the letters shining. I'll never get anywhere, okay? And I've figured out a technique is if you're looking at it actually inside, if you're looking at a prayer book inside and you say, you know, the words, Shavasenu Kabel Ushmatsenu, you can actually inside, internally, get the letters to shine. You could just do it in your mind's eye. You don't have to like do a huge visualization to picture the letters. And then sometimes I want to make a machine which makes the letters because I can't visualize them clearly. Okay? Do the best you can, work with it. But the idea, what I'm expressing this now to you, is that here, if we can practice this prayer, and then you can picture those letters shining. The letters are primordial energy fields. Okay? That means every letter is a vibration. And the letter sequences, and that's really what a name of God is. It's a sequence of vibrations that open up pathways, okay? Because if you're in a certain vibration, and everybody knows, certain thoughts which make you depressed and your vibration energy is low, and those type of people tend to get sick, physically sick, as opposed to people who are much more higher and a more higher vibration. That vibration, right, they tend to not get sick and be more healthier and happier, okay? So what I want, the letters of the Hebrew letters are extremely significant. And if you can look at this, and I wanted somebody to actually do some artwork on this, right? I was going to get one of a person in Houston, Yocheved, to go ahead and maybe see if she could do that. Would be really nice to have a poster of it. And that way when you say the Ana B'Koach, you could actually have it as a meditative device while it's on your wall or whatever. So the idea here is, as we say the prayer, and the prayers have great meaning, the idea here is at the same time you could look at the letters and do your best to try to get each letter to shine. And then later on we're going to get into other meditations with it. The first one is amazing. The first one corresponds to the day of the week, Sunday. Ana B'koach, that's today. Okay? Ana B'koach, which means please. Actually, that's Ana. Really, you should make a division between Ana and B'koach. This is only for this significant name, because the letters of B'koach, Gedulas, Yemincha go together, which means with the power of your great right hand, as we know that the right hand is always associated with kindness. So we're saying, Ana, please, with the power of your right hand, Tatir Tzarura, boy. Tatir Tzarura, which means free the bound, right? Or release the bound. This is an amazing concept. I heard Rabbi Moshe Weinberger say, and I still have to look inside the significance of releasing the bound, because what does that mean? So he said, it probably gets it from the Chalban. I did look in there, I didn't remember it. Means freeing the bound means free my sins. The sins are what bind us. Meaning release, let go. Free me from all my bounds, all my sins. That's one significant. Okay? One kavana of release the bound. But there's another one that I read in Rav Kook, which is just amazing. Okay? Because when we speak about God's chesed and God's kindness, there's an issue with kindness. Because sometimes you could do kindness, you want it to be received. And sometimes the kli, the vessel, who's receiving it, the person that's receiving that kindness, it's not fit. They're not mature enough. They're not mature enough to take it, right? They have limitations. There's limitations to giving, right? The giving has to be limited. The person with his own giving has to constrict. That's a giving, yes, in certain forms. But we're saying that God should release the bound, which means that there should be no limitations on the receiving, the bestowing that you can do, and the receiving that we could receive. Tatir Tzarura, release the bound, and help me to have that expansiveness. There's no limitations. Hakol Yachol, there's nothing you can't do. And in that awareness of there's nothing you can't do, I am now in the right state to now be in the place of receiving that infinite bounty, okay? That infinite influx, okay? That's number one. That's prayer number one, okay? Please, God, in the strength of your right hand, there's no God actually mentioned here, Ana B'koach Gedulas, with the strength of your right hand, release the bound. That's the very first thing, is to expand, okay? To have that level of total expansion, and that is today's meditation, okay? And now each day has its own significant meditation, as we're going to see from the book Meditation in Kabbalah, and from some other Kabbalists, Rabbi Bar Tzadok has, and there's many people who have different forms of it. The idea here is to practice. You have it in front of you, and you got to start practicing it. Even though you might not feel the significance right away, okay? You have to start, and you just start slowly, and you go, Ana, just start with that one thing, okay? Please, with the strength of your right hand, release the bound. And that could have so much other significance, not only for us personally, but for the world itself, okay? And that if you can do that and think and contemplate the letters, and now, if you really want to be creative, and maybe I'll be able to send this later on, there are certain nigunim, there are certain melodies that people have constructed that go with it, which is really great. And I have one too that I'll share with you later on, okay? Happens to be a Shlomo melody, okay, Shlomo Karlbach melody. And if you have a melody that goes along with it, it becomes a fantastic meditation. Now, be careful with this. We always say, watch what you pray for. This is where I'm going to end it. I know a friend of mine personally, okay? A friend of mine personally who was using the Ana B'Koach. It was meditating, he was doing yoga with the Ana B'Koach, and then he was having a conversation, not while he was doing yoga, with my father-in-law, Alav Shalom, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. And my father-in-law was talking about this guy who basically all his children, he was a Jew, all his children were from a non-Jewish mother. And my father-in-law blurted out, maybe it's time that you have a child, a Jewish child. Boom. And somehow that phrase coming from the master stuck in this man, my friend. And lo and behold, yeah, that's right. Amigos, something happened. He went on a date, yada, yada. Okay? And the rest of it is that, yes, he ended up having a Jewish child, right? So now then after, he didn't touch that prayer after that for a while. Okay, maybe he's going back to it now. So that, what I'm saying is, you have to be focused on what your prayers are. That even though, let's say, while you're doing this prayer, that you're, the rest of the day, you might pray here, might pray there, might say something here, something there, it's going to have a effect, right? It's going to quantify, okay, the effect, along with sweetening the judgments, okay, that we're going to talk about next week when we talk about the 7 vapors, okay? Next week we'll talk about the 7 vapors. And if I forget about it, please remind me to remind you, or you will remind me to tell it. Okay, we're going to end